There are many phases that you may experience after retirement: denial, anger, a phase of low or depression, and then eventually like figuring out what's your new things, your new passions. As an athlete, your body's your machine and you're really proud of that machine and you've been like working with that machine. You see athletes who cannot wait to stop exercising, but then they stop completely. They gain weight, they can't sleep properly. One first step, a duration plan. So like don't stop everything at once. Often we are asked, so what do you do? And when you're no longer an athlete, this is a triggering question. You're allowed to not have the answers, and you're allowed to say you don't have the answers.
Hi, Myriam, and welcome to the Sport Journey podcast.
Hi, Crystal. Thanks for having me.
I'm really sorry for having to wake you up so early. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. No problem for the time.
If you could start by giving us a brief introduction about your athletic background and also maybe what inspired you to start Athlete Soul in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm originally from France. I grew up in a family from the mountain, but I eventually became a swimmer, and I was a synchronized swimmer. I competed for the French national team for over 10 years, culminating in the Olympics in 2000. And then I competed after that for the Australian national team in 2008. Retired the second time around. I had a first retirement before that in 2008 after Beijing, and um, lived all over the world between Australia, England, the US, and Asia. I'm currently based in the US. I have worked in many different industries, including travel and hotels, and then the sport industry. And I worked for the US synchronized swimming team for a long time before I started Athlete Soul about 5 years ago. And Athlete Soul is a nonprofit organization. We are based in California, but we work with athletes from all over the world. And our organization was founded by athletes and former athletes 5 years ago with the goal of supporting elite athletes as they transition to their next step of life. So we offer a lot of different services in order to do that. And we work with athletes who are still competing to help them prepare, and then with athletes who have just retired to guide them through the transition journey.
And where is the organization today? Because it has been now 5 years. How has it grown since it began?
It's definitely grown over the last 5 years. We are now about over 600 members. We've helped 200 athletes on either like a small number, like a group support or a one-on-one support over this time. We offer 4 different programs. We have received funding as a nonprofit. Part of the work that we do is have enough fundings to support as many athletes as we want, and so we have now secure fundings for the next 3 years. We have a group of, I think we're about 40 now, either volunteer or staff working to lead the organization and work with the athletes. So yeah, we've supported athletes from 32 different sports and 55 nationalities, which has been pretty cool.
Wow. So now the one thing that all athletes have in common is the unavoidable event of athletic retirement. However, the circumstances around why an athlete retires can vary widely. And I would like to ask you if you could give me the different factors that lead athletes to retire.
Yeah, there's I guess you can classify it first in 2 buckets. One is you either somewhat choose or not choose to retire. Um, what we call the unchosen retirement often comes with things that are of your control or not. So out of your control could be, you're deselected, your contract is ended, the rules of your sport change, maybe the university you go to does not have a program anymore, there is no longer funding for your sport. These are, or your government decides to boycott an event or an Olympic Games, for example. So these are like a lot of reason where your career would end rapidly and without your control. And others would relate more to your physical health or injuries, or career-ending injuries, or an accumulation of injuries that lead you to either not perform as well or decide to retire for your health. So all these situations generally lead to more difficult retirement because they're unplanned, less prepared, they're quite sudden. They may happen at times where you don't expect it. And so it's difficult to um, find a ways to manage that. And if you haven't taken any steps prior to this to prepare, that could be really difficult. Um, the other retirement would be those that are more chosen for reasons of, like, you've aged in your sport and you've sort of achieved sort of the end of your age career, I guess, or simply you've achieved your goal. Sometimes it could be a loss of motivation gradually, and you decide, okay, that's it. Um, but these are usually more gradual, and you can prepare and you see them coming, rather than the sudden retirement that are a little bit more difficult to manage.
And how did you face athletic retirement?
I actually had two retirements. So the first one was totally unchosen and unprepared, and a complete surprise. And this was before the Athens Olympics. And I had just been selected to go in one of the top business schools in France. And my coaches asked me at the beginning of the season, they basically said, you either prepare for the Olympics or you go to business school. Coming from a sport where there is no professional outcome, and you can't make any money. At the time, you couldn't make any money from the sport. I decided to walk away and go to business school. So that was my first retirement. And I was 22, so it's pretty young. I could have gone to,
Yes.
two other cycle of Olympics. That first retirement was complicated emotionally. I had things to do. I was going to school, so I still had things to attend to, and that kept me on track. But emotionally, I was very angered at my coaches, at the sport. I sort of rejected it. Um, and there was a lot of turmoil in terms of emotion. I felt like I did not complete what I had to complete. And then, life happened and I lived in different places and I moved to Australia and I had the opportunity to come back and compete for Australia. And so I ended up resuming my career after 3 years off, training with the national team for several years and then attending competition internationally and then the Beijing Olympics. I knew I was going to retire after Beijing. This felt like a little bit of a parenthesis of, like, yeah, I was able to come back and finish in my own terms, and now I'm deciding, okay, this is it after Beijing. And so the second time around was much easier for me. I had a full-time job. I was married. I had like life was established outside of sport, and I had a lot of things to fall back onto. And so that was a complete um, different experience, which was also why, part of this is the inspiration for athletes. So it's like, if you've experienced the two, how can we help those who have a difficult retirement, make it a little bit easier and facilitate that transition?
So now, for all the athletes out there who haven't yet gone through the process of athletic retirement, could you maybe simply explain the different phases that they might experience?
There are many there are many phases that you may experience after retirement. They don't always come in the same order for everybody. But generally, it's a little bit similar to how you would experience grief. So, um, you go through like anger and denial, anger, sort of a phase of low or depression, and then starting going back up with eventually like figuring out what's your new things, your new passions. It doesn't always happen in that order, and it also depends on how the end of your retirement came about. Um, if it's sudden and unplanned, there is often a period of denial or rejection of what just happened or what if. And this is usually followed by being really upset at what happened. For most athletes that I've seen, unless it was a chosen retirement that came as a way of relief, for most of them, there is a period of depression when they realize, okay, this is really it, and I'm never going to do this again. Um, and in that moment, you have to be careful and make sure that you have people around you supporting you, and giving you perspective so that you don't get too stuck in that moment of negative and difficult emotions. Then after that, it's sort of going back and discovering other things and starting to see other interests that you may have outside of sport and how they can transform into something else, into a profession or hobbies or other things like that. This really depends on like how your retirement came, and the feelings around that. I think another element is more related to like the physical changes, and that's generally quite hard for athletes to um, manage because as an athlete, you know, your body's your machine and you're really proud of that machine and you've been like working with that machine and it's been a reflection of your achievement and your status as an athlete. And this machine is about to change and pretty quickly. And you see athletes who cannot wait to stop exercising, but then they stop completely and then they gain weight and they can't sleep properly. And there's a lot of issues that come from that. Or you have the athletes who wants to still look the part and they continue to exercise intensely, and that's just not sustainable in the long run if you're going to have a different job and do other things. So there's sort of like this fitness yo-yo that happens for the few years after retirement where athletes kind of discover what it looks like to live and exercise as a normal human being and eat also as a normal human being. If you're I've been in sports where you can eat as many, you know, a ton of calorie every day and then suddenly you cannot no longer do that. That requires a little bit of adjustment. So lots of potential changes happening after retirement. And with all of these also come all the hormonal changes of like not having as much endorphins, adrenaline, like all of the happy, feel good and hormones that you get when you exercise. When you remove a lot of these, plus remove the sunshine, this can also affect your mental health and your brain in a drastic way. So yeah, there could be a lot of different changes happening.
I spoke with a former teammate of mine that I used to play with, I think it was 10 years ago. And he told me when he stopped competing, from 70 kilos, he went to 100 kilos. And that was the one thing. The second thing was the lack of this regular training plan. And that the fact that you don't have a coach anymore to tell you, okay, next week you're gonna be here 7 times and you're gonna do those things, and after the training you're gonna do those things. So this part of being a professional athlete falls apart. So how now from this change, how can athletes take control of their lives and manage these changes effectively after retirement?
I think one first step, and it's easier to say, you know, when you're thinking about a planned retirement, but at least to put in place some sort of what we call a deceleration plan. So like don't stop everything at once. Like slowly decrease your level of working out so that you can also slowly decrease how much you eat, for example. You can adjust your sleep, keep some sort of structure going, even if it's going for a walk in the morning and having a workout 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe have people do it with you so that it forces you to do it, and you are able to meet with others, because I think one of the element too is the loss of that team environment and the accountability of your coach and other
Yes.
people around you. As an athlete, you're really surrounded by um, a lot of people. Even if they're just telling you what to do, you still have a lot of people around you. And so when that's gone, it's not just the structure that you lose, but it's also this interaction. And so how can you reproduce these interaction in different ways? As silly as, just going and having a coffee and seeing the person from the coffee shop every day. That gets you out, that get you some sunshine, that get you to connect with someone. So finding these little points to keep something going. Um, and then trying new things, um, trying things that you've always wanted to do, but you could never do as an athlete because you didn't have the time. Um, Figuring out what is it that you like in addition to sport. Um, and really building from there. Like, you're gonna have to try a lot of things to see what you do and don't, what you do like and what you don't like. But these could be ways to figure out, the next step. If you have absolutely no idea of what you want to do in life, you're gonna have to try a lot of different things to figure out what's next, and you're gonna have to fail at those things.
And I think this helps you also to develop to develop an identity outside of sports, because the question we all we are asked is what do you do for a living? And most of us, what you're gonna say, you're gonna say I'm a professional football player or I'm a professional volleyball player or whatever it is. And when you have done something for 15 to 20 years, and then out of nowhere you don't do that anymore, and but people keep asking this question, but you don't have an answer, then brings you in a hard position, I would say, as an athlete or as a former athlete. And just you just mentioned now to find this interest that you had as a young kid that you didn't have the time anymore to do because you had to compete. And is there another way to develop this identity that is not only related to your sport?
So there's a few things I want to say. Number one, you don't stop um being an athlete when you stop being a competitive athlete. Whatever you have developed around that identity, that athletic identity, you'll carry that identity through your whole life, and you'll use what you've learned through that phase of your life, through your whole life. So it doesn't disappear. You take it with you, and it will influence everything that you do and how you do it and the interaction you have with people. So it's I know we talk a lot about in this space about the loss of identity, and I think it's more of a reinvention. You're not losing what you've already worked on. You take it with you, and you add to it, and you add layer, and you diversify what you can do as a person, because we all have a lot more to offer than just being professional athletes. So it's just trying to figure out how can I recycle my skills in a different field or industry where I can be as successful as what I just did in my sport. So I think that's really important. You're not losing something, you're adding to it.
Yes.
Um, and you can start doing that when you're still competing. And you can definitely like trying to do these few things on the side that don't always take a lot of time, but help you figure out what you like and what you don't like. Things that maybe other young adults have done during their teenage years, and as an athlete, you haven't had the chance necessarily to do that. But when you get in your 20s and you're a little bit more established in your athletic career, you may then have a couple of hours a week to dedicate to doing that. And it's wide ranging on how you can do that. It could be talking with different people about what they do and seeing if it interests you. It can be trying things. It could be, going to dance class or yoga or like traveling, having hobbies, one hobby like cooking, painting, whatever it is, or finance, account, like trying to explore different words that may seem related that to things that you like as a person, um, and keeping that in mind and seeing where the connections are. I think that's really important, and not being afraid to try and fail in those space, because
Yes.
those are not failure. They're just lessons that tell you, okay, I like this, I don't like this. This is perfect because then I'm going to move more in this direction, and I'm going to continue to refine what is it that I like for that next step.
Because I think that's the best way to find what you like. And if you dedicated your life, most of your life, for something that you really loved, I think even if it takes a while, it's worth it to take the time to find what is going to be the next chapter, because you are also
Absolutely.
going to spend a lot of time doing that.
And as an athlete, as you know, like, you usually start your sport because of passion, because you love it. Um, and it's hard to imagine a life where you're doing something just to put money on the table and that you
Yes,
don't necessarily love. So I think it's really important for athletes to identify other passions, something that will really give you the motivation to keep going, rather than just thinking, oh no, my life as of sport is going to be this 9 to 5 where I don't really care about what I'm doing. I don't think that makes a lot of sense for a lot of athletes. I think trying to find something with purpose is a lot more appealing, and definitely will
absolutely.
take you out of some of the sadness and of moving on from your sport.
So we spoke about identity crisis. We spoke about unhealthy eating habits. We spoke also about not having the training schedule. But another challenge that a lot of athletes face is the financial instability, meaning that there are a lot of examples of famous and well known, like famous athletes who did great while they were still competing. They had to retire as well one day, and then they kept spending the same amount of money as they were under contract, which was not the case. So they finished the resources, the financial resources, and then they kind of fell into depression. So what would you recommend in those cases?
So I think the financial situation of athletes is very varied depending on the sport, the background, the level, how they've lived or not. You may have athletes who spend more than they can once they retire. You may have athletes who find themselves suddenly with no more contracts. And it's not a question of of having less spending. They just have no income. And there's often a pretty high financial pressure that comes with athletic retirement. Um, because let's be honest, very few athletes have put money on the side to be able to continue to live at a certain level. And so you would have to find a way to replace that income. Um, I think what's important to consider here is that there is a job and the job. And you may be finding a job to keep you going for a period of time, for a transition time, and it could be anything really, as long as it helps you be able to survive and pay your bill and pay your rent, etc. But it doesn't have to be your dream job. And quite frankly, no young person that comes out of college or university will have their dream job straight away. So I think it's important to just consider, okay, let's do a job that will, I mean, if you can get your dream job at straight away, fantastic, but most of us will not. So if you can find a job that helps you survive for a period of time while you're figuring things out, while you're figuring what's your next passion, and something that really fuels your purpose, that's fine. And there may be a few jobs, maybe the first one doesn't work, it'd be the second or the third or the fourth. Just keep trying. So I think it's important for people to understand the difference. Because I think as an athlete, we've had the dream job from the get go.
Yes,
But in real life, it doesn't really work like this. You usually try many, many different things before you find the dream job. And so that's okay. It's totally
Hmm.
okay to do a lot of different things to be able to figure out what you want to do. And you asked me a question earlier about identity, and often we are asked, so what do you do? And
Yes,
when you're no longer an athlete, this is a triggering question. It's hard
absolutely.
to answer. It makes you uncomfortable. And quite frankly, it's okay to say, I don't know yet. Like,
Mhm.
you're allowed to not have the answers, and you're allowed to say you don't have the answers. I know that as a professional athlete, you're supposed to have the answer, and you're supposed to look composed and look the piece and always like feel like you've got everything under control. But when that ends, I think you'd be surprised that saying this would actually probably trigger some really interesting conversation with people that may want to help you, one, either figuring out what you want to do or even finding a job before the dream job. Like, I think people would be willing to help if we show a little bit of vulnerability. So,
Mhm.
I just encourage everybody to say, hey, yeah, I just finished my career as a professional athlete, and I'm now spending time figuring out what I'm doing next. I don't know. It's okay.
Yeah,
um,
that's a very good approach. And I think also when you just share the fact that you might need some help, some guidance to navigate this transition, and also get some ideas from people that they are not necessarily in sports. They are just coming from other industries. I think you can still get some insights that can be really helpful
yeah,
for you.
absolutely. And you're right. When you say, I don't know, I'm figuring it out, you are ultimately saying, inviting the other person to help you out.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier about having a support system. And regardless the occasions, I mean, in sports, I think it's really important to have a support system through your career because, as we know, sports has come with ups and downs, and most of the times the downs are more. And in that case, you need people around you that support you no matter what happens. So, how do you build this support system?
I believe that it was really important to build a support system when you're still competing.
Mhm.
Um, of course, you can do that after you retire. But the earlier you can put it together, the easier it is to go to these people to help you out when the time comes. Because it does take time to build that amount of relationship with someone to the point where you can open up if something is difficult. And so, considering having a support system while you're a competitive athlete, I think is really important. And you can include individuals that are within your sport, maybe one or two, but then you want to also spread out outside of your sport so that you have people that can give you perspective. And we like to recommend to the athletes, yes, you have someone in your sport who may be a mentor. That's great. And you have someone in your family that you trust and you can confide in, and that can be a mentor as well. But who are the individuals outside of those two circles that you would still like to talk to, or you could go to and ask questions? Because these, again, will give you the perspective. They will be sitting outside of the sport bubble, uh, and give you a little bit more of a reality check on what life is. And that's not all just centered on sport.
So, having different people from different backgrounds, it's gonna it's gonna help you to build a strong support system.
Absolutely. And you may get completely different advices from those in your sport, your family, your friends, and people that are completely outside of sport. So obviously, it's up to you then to reconcile this information and figure out what works for you. But that's the beauty of it, is that you get to have perhaps contradictory information, and more of a diversity of it.
Now, speaking of support, I know that Athletes All offers transition coaching programs, and I would like you maybe to take some time to explain what athletes can expect from these coaching programs, maybe how they can apply, and who would benefit most from having a coach during this phase?
Absolutely. So Athletes offers three main programs. The first one is a group coaching program that we do for um, actively competing athletes or late career athlete. This program is really about mindset, performance, well-being, developing and learning about yourself and how you grow as a person in and outside of your sport. So we work through this program. It's a live program that lasts 12 weeks. There's 1 hour meeting once a week. You are in a group with athletes from different sports and different nationalities as well. The main language is English.
Nice.
um, and you work on emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, self-regulation, mindset, resiliency, goal setting, identity exploration. So it's essentially a personal development program to improve your high performance in and outside of sports. After this program, we can recommend a one-on-one program. And we have two one-on-one program. One is a mentoring program and one is a coaching program. The mentoring lasts generally about 6 months. We pair an athlete with a former athlete, and they work together on a specific goal that they would have agreed upon together. Generally, we pair the athlete with someone who may be working in an industry that they want to get into so that they get a little bit of a kickstart in that space. And then the one-on-one coaching is a little bit more intensive. Generally, we would recommend this for someone who's had a pretty challenging end of career, and maybe be at a little bit of a risk of a deeper crisis and need more assistance. This is led by a professional coach who is also a former athlete, and they work weekly for the period of 3 months towards helping the athletes mitigate those challenges from retirement and finding a little bit more balance in that life after sport. So these are our three main programs. So usually athletes sign up on our website at athletesoul.org, and then they do the group coaching. And then after the group coaching, they may do the one-on-one support as well. And for a numerous number of years after that, they have access to also all of our resources. So we do interviews of former athletes. We have networking event, virtual and in person. We have a monthly group coaching session for all of our members so that if they want to continue to do some personal work, they can do that. And we offer all of these services to athletes at no cost to them. So we have scholarship available on a monthly basis, and they can take advantage of these to participate in any of our programs.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all this information. And another thing that it just came to my mind right now, it's because I'm still competing, but not professional anymore. And some of the questions I get from athletes is, I mean, I see them a little bit anxious about starting something new after retirement, or uncertain about what they will do next. And the first thing it comes to my mind is like I make them aware that they are not starting from scratch because they have developed certain skills maybe they are not aware of, maybe they are, that no matter what they're going to do next, it's going to be they're going these skills are going to be really helpful for them, but also for the employees or the employers. Sorry. So, and I want to ask you, like, based on your experience in the corporate world and working with other athletes, if you could share what those skills might be and how they can benefit athletes in their next chapter.
There is a there are so many skills that we develop as athletes that are useful after sport and in the corporate world, and a lot of them that are transferable. I think what's really important for athletes is to learn how to rename those skills in using words that an employer would understand. Um, and part of that work we do in our program. Uh, but it's really speaking the language of the employer. You've been goal setting and then putting in place a strategy and adjusting your strategy if you didn't reach the goal. This is exactly what you do in any company. Like a company will be setting goals and then they have a specific tactic they put in place for that year, and then they have KPI or ways to evaluate if they reach the goal or not, and then they readjust. Like you do that in every company. Obviously, teamwork and communication is another one. It's trying to really identify as an athlete, what were you good at? Uh, were you good at making super fast decision on the field where you played that were then, you know, translate into the winning goal? Were you really good at talking to your teammates and helping with conflict or getting the best out of them? Were you really good at trying and trying and trying over even when you failed? So it's trying to identify those skills for yourself and then write those down and figure out how you can translate those into the workplace. These are really important skills because in a world where now you are going to have a lot of AI, a lot of machines, a lot of robot, a lot of things are automated, the technical skills will be done by robot or they can be learned pretty quickly. But those soft skills, problem solving, creativity, fast decision making, working with others from different background, working with people of different culture, being able to continue to start over and over and be resilient, they're harder to teach and you already have them. So that's the really exciting part. Now I think athletes start at the same level as everybody else when they go in their next job. They will start at the bottom. They have not as much experience sometimes, but you will progress way faster. And so I think that's what is to remember. Yes, you're going in perhaps as an older person, perhaps with less experience or experience from a different field. And you're going to have to start from scratch, but you will progress so much faster than anybody else just because you already have those important soft skills.
They're really great insights. And I have to say, I truly consider you one of my mentors, and I'm very grateful for all I have learned from you during my internship at Athlete Soul and beyond. And with that in mind, with all the experience you've gained over the years, leading people and an organization focused on helping athletes transition smoothly into life after sports, what have you learned about yourself?
I've learned about myself something that I see with you too and others is that I think that athletes are really creative. If there was one skill that I think we have that is under discussed, like people often talk about resiliency and hard work and teamwork, but I think the creativity for me, which I put in the sense of like problem solving, like we are very good at thinking of outside of the box to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And I think that's like a survival skill in this world. Like you can use this in any situation. And it's been fantastic to see this in athletes, in others, um, and realize, okay, this is also what I've done as a person. Always trying to figure out if there's two paths, what is the third one that I can take that will get me where I want to be, either quicker or in a more challenging way. So I call it creativity. You can call it problem solving. Just a way of thinking outside the box.
What advice would you give to someone taking their first steps into a new path?
Embrace discomfort. It's it
You're used
doesn't
to it.
feel
Yes,
great.
embrace it.
It's it's awkward, but it's not gonna last. It's like when you visit a new place and everything feels new and you're like, whoa, it's overwhelming. And then the second time you come back, you're like, oh no, I'm comfortable with this. And then eventually you go home and you're like, oh yeah, this feels like home. So it's the same thing. The very first time will feel strange, and then the second time a little bit less, and then eventually you'll master it, and then you'll move on to the next one.
That's awesome. And the last thing I would like to ask you is if I could take you back in time to the moment you decided to retire. Maybe it would be the first one, which was, I think, a bit harder, but you have all the knowledge and experience you have gained until today. So, what advice would you give to your younger self?
This is a trick question because a lot of people would want me to not walk away and maybe offer an alternative. Like, I think I could have negotiated with my coaches at the time to do something different. I didn't know at 22, I didn't have the knowledge or the perspective to think I could negotiate in my position. But having said that, a lot of amazing things happened in my life after that decision, so I wouldn't really change it. I would redo it the same way because the challenges and the hardship that I faced helped me do other things
Yes.
that I would have
And
not
be the
done
person you are
otherwise.
today.
Exactly. Um, and I was able to compete for another country and do other things. So I wouldn't change it. Uh, so perhaps the advice is don't overthinking too much. I think we make the decision. I think we make the best decision for ourselves with the knowledge that we have at that time.
So that would be all. Uh, thank you, really. Thank you very much for taking the time. I truly appreciate also all the things you have shared, and I have been knowing you for a while. So I think you are the best person who could speak about athletic retirement, and we see also all the things you have been doing for athletes, and I'm really thank you for it. I'm really thankful for it. And if anyone has questions or needs guidance on navigating their own transition, they can reach out to us. I'm gonna put everything on the description below. And also about Athlete Soul, also about the coaching programs and the resources you have there. And again, thanks again very much.
Thank you, Christos. And listen, I feel the same. It's been an incredible journey and for you, and it's been amazing watching from afar what you've done and all the amazing opportunities that you have created for yourself. So can't wait to see what the next 5 years look like.
Let's see. Thanks once
Yeah.
again.